on the screen, you see where it says the 0?
Mm-hmm.
That just tells you how many minutes you're into the recording.
Oh, okay.
So you see that go up,
Perfect.
1, 2, and so on.
Okay.
That's all it means. It's not a countdown or anything.
Okay.
It may also help you too, because given the time on this, when that says 51,
I'm good.
you got to
Okay.
because we got to get you over to CJW.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
now I will. If you're off and excited and into it,
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know. That'd be great. Thanks.
Don't worry about it.
Perfect.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Oh, that was better than the last few times. Today, as you guys know over here, we have a guest lecturer. Okay, he's going to be with us for the first 15 minutes of class, and he has to be out of here, unfortunately, to get to another meeting promptly at 2:20. So we're going to jump right into it. This is soon to be Dr. Charlie Collins from Michigan State University, and he's going to spend some time today giving you guys a little background into a construct known as relational power.
Thank you. This is, can I turn this? How do I get this on? There it is. Okay, great. First, can I get some, actually, I'll just sort of hand out a couple sections. Can you guys take one of these and pass the rest on? Here. That one I'm going to wait for a second for. Here you go. Here you got one. I think I have enough. I have about 40, so hopefully that's enough. Okay. My talk today is on power as social structure. So what we're going to do is we're really going to look at how power is manifested through relationships and how people can gain power through the relationships that they have. So first, let's think about an issue that we have in our communities, or in the country for that matter. The unemployment rate in the United States is at about 8%. For white people, that's about 7.2%. For Latinos, it's about 10.2%. And for the Black and African American community, it's a bit higher. It's about 14.1%. When we look at Chicago, so I do a lot of work in Chicago and with organizations in Chicago. When we look at Chicago's unemployment, it's around 10%. When we look at Black and African American people in Chicago, their unemployment rate is about 19%, so almost double what the Chicago unemployment is. So the question here is, how can we begin to solve this problem? How can power be created within communities in order to address this issue? So what I want to do is introduce a quick video. And this video is with Gamilio of Metro Chicago. Now, what Gamilio Metro Chicago is they're a community organizing organization or a community organizing affiliate, right? And so what they do is they build relationships within the community of Chicago in order to address various issues. In this video you're going to see, that I'll pull up next slide, they're building, I feel weird like I need to stay within these between here. Keep going back and forth. What they're doing in this, I'm going to sneak over here. What they're doing in this video is they're building a relationship with a powerful person in their community. And the purpose of this is for them to create power as an organization to be able to address issues of unemployment, and specifically unemployment among people of color. And so what you're going to see in this video is this is a public assembly where the public was invited to attend, and it's with Representative Will Davis. And so what you'll see in the video is a representative of GMC, so Gamilio Metro Chicago, and you'll see Representative Will Davis. Representative Will Davis is an Illinois state senator, and the goal of this discussion that these two individuals are having is to build a relationship between GMC, Gamilio Metro Chicago, and Will Davis. And the purpose is to use Will Davis's influence as a state representative to build power for the organization.
Now this is 3 parts. Amen. Representative Davis, will you partner with South Suburban Action Conference and GMC, Gamaliel Metro Chicago, and other elected officials to work together to develop a fair and equitable governance agreement for the South Suburban Airport and meet with our Economic Development Task Force on a quarterly basis? I will.
Okay, so there's 2 other parts, but I really want to focus on that first component, right? So again, this is a representative from GMC or Gamaliel Metro Chicago talking with Representative Will Davis to build a relationship. So, and if anybody has any questions throughout this, please just raise your hand and let me know. And does everybody have one of those papers? Are they still going around? So the representative of Gamaliel Metro Chicago asked, will you, Representative Davis, meet with GMC and our Economic Development Task Force on a quarterly basis, right? So essentially, will you develop and maintain a relationship with us to address these issues of unemployment, it's really unemployment for people of color within Chicago? So I'm going to skip to this side now, so I'm a little all over the place. So what we're finding here is GMC is building power. Gamaliel Metro Chicago is building power by building relationships with powerful people. And that's their main purpose. And they do this by exchanging resources, right? They exchange ideas, they exchange money. In Will Davis's example, they're exchanging influence, right? The relationship builds influence. And so the cool thing about this is we can really start breaking this down. We can start really understanding how power is built through relationships and the structure of those relationships. So Neil and Neil say, these are some community psychologists here, say that the pattern of relationships that exist among participants in a setting through which resources are exchanged is what creates power. Now let's take a minute to break this down. So first, we have the idea of relationships, right? So within GMC and Will Davis's office, there's a relationship that's being created there. A second part to this definition is that there are some sort of resources exchanged, some sort of influence or other resource that's exchanged within that relationship as part of that relationship. And finally, power exists through the pattern of those relationships. So it's not just GMC's relationship with Will Davis, but it's also GMC's relationship with other people in Chicago, as well as Will Davis's relationship with other people in Chicago. And understanding power through this idea, we can really start breaking it down and get more tangible with it. So I'd like to take a second and introduce the idea of social networks. In social networks, there are methods. So first I have to say, when I say social networks, get Facebook out of your head. So I know Facebook is a social network, so I'm just going to kind of wander all over the place. So Facebook is a social network, but the idea of social networks is a much broader idea, and it's a method that we use in the social sciences to understand phenomena. So now that we've addressed that elephant, kick them out of the room. So social networks. The circles here are called nodes or actors. They represent actors in a setting, such as individuals. So everybody in this classroom can be considered a node or an actor within a social network. Groups, so it can be this classroom or other classrooms, or it can be various organizations, right? So in the case of GMC and Will Davis, GMC's office, or excuse me, GMC as an organization is an actor or a node. Will Davis's office is an actor or a node within a social network. The lines here represent connections, relationships, or exchanges between actors. Oh, this isn't going. Okay. So these connections can be anything like friends, colleagues, partners, influence, like I said before. It can be referral organizations. It can be organizations working on the same issue. So again, in the case of GMC and Will Davis, they're both working on issues of unemployment for people of color within Chicago. So all of these things together are what is called a sociogram. So there's sort of a lot of names for this, right? It's called a sociogram, it's called a network, it's called a system. So I may refer to this as any one of those things. So that's the combination of both the actors as well as the connections is called a sociogram, a network, or a setting. So, excuse me, sorry. So I would like to use just sort of an example here as for a social network. Who watches Grey's Anatomy? All right. So this is a social network of Grey's Anatomy, right? So in the circles here, Sloane's sort of in the middle of a lot of sexual relationships. I don't even know who that is, but so each person here is an actor. Each connection is a sexual relationship. That's what builds the connection, right? So let's take a little just quick a deeper view of it. So each little circle here is a person. It represents an individual that's considered a node or an actor within this sexual social network. The lines represent connections or relationships. In this situation, that connection is sex. You've had sex with another person, that's the relationship, right? So let's try to think about how social networks work. So then when we think about the whole structure, that's the whole system, right? That's the system or the whole network. So what I'd like you guys to do, social networks. Oh, just real quick, I want to go over, no, I don't. I want to go back. So you guys all have a box at the top of your little thing. Take 2 minutes and draw a sociogram with at least 5 actors. And I'm not checking my email, I'm timing you, so just so I have enough time. So take 2 minutes, draw a sociogram. It can be about your family, it can be about anything. And I want you to identify the connections, how people are connected, and identify who those people are. And then I'll sort of pick on a couple of you to let me know what those are. So I'll give you 2 minutes for that. And if you need assistance at all, if I haven't been clear, please let me know and I can walk around and help you out. Make sure I'm on time. What time am I? 1:42. Okay, that's what time we're leaving. 2:20. Okay, thanks. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. I'm going to pick on you guys now. So, does anybody want to volunteer their social network? If not, I'm just going to start picking people out of the crowd. Yes? I want to see it. Okay. Okay. So how are you guys connected? Okay. So it's like friendship type of relationships? You all live in the same house? Oh, okay. So it's the whole house. So why isn't this person connected to that person? Oh, I see. But they live in the same house, right? Okay. I would think so, yeah. Yeah, if they live in the same house. So it depends on what your connection is. Right, so the thing about social networks is it matters what those connections are, and within this context of thinking about social networks as a methodology, each person should be essentially connected the same way, right? So we should all be friends, or in this case, sexual relationships, right? We've all had a sexual relationship with, not we've all, Grey's Anatomy all. So living in the same house is another example. Can I pick on you? What do you got?
Myself, my roommate, she's connected to her two other friends. They go to church together with
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Just workout partners.
Okay. So how would you define generally these relationships?
Just friendship and different.
Friendships?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Anybody else want to volunteer? Okay, that's fine. We'll move on. So thinking about this now, thinking about social networks and power, right? So now let's move on to power. Power exists for actors based on resource exchanges or networks, or connections they have with other actors. And how those other actors are connected with each other, right? So it's the whole structure of these relationships. So what I'd like you to do is I need 10 volunteers. And I'll bribe you with these things. What are these? Tootsie Rolls. So I'll bribe you with Tootsie Rolls. So since you all are close, I'm just picking on people in the first row. Sorry. Excuse me for 1 second. You all need cards. Okay. So you're going to get a card. And just hold on. Do not eat any of these, please. Would you help me out? Would you pass one of these out to each person? Pass 4 of these out to each person I give a card to. Yes. So don't eat them, because you need them. They're your resources. Give you one. I'm going to give you one. And if I accidentally give you 2, let me know. So, do you have one yet? You don't. Give you one. Give you one. Give you one. I'll give you one. And then I'll give you one. Okay. Sorry, I sort of scattered all over the place. Okay, so if you have a card and a Hershey Kiss, please come up to the front. Or not a Hershey Kiss, I'm sorry. Tootsie Rolls, thank you. I intended on getting Hershey Kisses, but they're really expensive. So if you have a card and your Tootsie Rolls, please come up to the front. With the card and the Tootsie Rolls. So to demonstrate how power works, and I'd like you all to just sort of pay attention, try to pay attention the best you can to what's going on here. So your goal, you have 4 resources, right? You have 4 Tootsie Rolls. These are, I'll talk to you guys, not you. So you all have 4 Tootsie Rolls, right? So these are going to be considered your resources. And so I have the instructions up here too, just in case you get lost. You have to give away all 4 of your resources, your Tootsie Rolls, to one of your friends. So each of you have different friends that are indicated on your cards, right? You can distribute them evenly to your friends, or you can give them all to one friend. And if you give one to a friend, they don't have to give you one back, okay? So I'm sort of going through this. So keep that in mind. You have to give all 4 away, but your goal at the end is to end up with the most resources as you can, okay? So find your friends. Give your friends your resources and try to get as many back in return. Does that make sense? It does? You seem...
Well, I was trying to see if there's ways we could, can I convince someone to give me their...
Do whatever you want. Yeah. I mean, don't get them in a headlock. But yeah, so find your friends and give away your resources. And everybody here sort of watch what's going on and maybe try to figure out what's happening. And for the people in the crowd, never mind. I'll get to that in a second.
See, and you have to give them away, so if you can't find before, you have to give them to me because I'm the only one that's there. I am before. I'm B3. Oh, here's your other friend. I'm B3. That's so weird. There's a 4 right in front of me.
Have you guys all figured it out? Okay, so you did give away all 4 of your resources, right? Okay, cool. Do not eat them yet. Keep them in your hand and go sit back down. I need the number for each person that had the number you have, so please, like I said, don't eat them yet. So what I'd like to do now is break into smaller groups of 2 or 3, and that might be a little more difficult for you all on the periphery, but I have the second question, sort of discussion question, break into smaller groups, and then talk about, do you think some people had more resources at the end of the activity? And if so, why would they have more resources? So it'll, I think, work better for you guys who are in the conversation, but for those of you on the outside, if you try to see what was going on, I'd like you to come up with some thoughts. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, right now. Yep. Do these markers work? Are they? Okay. Is there a color that's like the best color? Do you know? Oh, you do? Okay. Blue looks pretty good. I'm going with blue. Throw them?
I have some of my personal ones here. So
Oh, okay.
guys, you got
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so I'd like 2 reasons. Can somebody give me a reason why one person may have had more resources than another at the end of this? More friends, okay. Hopefully you all can see that. My writing isn't the best. Can I get another one? More energy. I'll take one more. Yeah.
Some people were friends with people who had more resources. And so you're friends with somebody who has more.
Wait, say that one more time so I can write it down so it makes sense.
Friends with people who had more friends.
Friends with people who had more friends. Okay, I'm friends with. Okay, so I'm going to name go ahead, sorry.
It just meant like they have more resources to give you.
Right. Yeah, because they're connected to other people. Okay, that makes sense. So I want to quickly just name off each of the people. So grab your card, and when I say your card number, so A1, tell me how many Tootsie Rolls you had at the end of this. So A1. 9? A2? 4? 4? A3? 5. B1? 3. B2? 6. Wow, that's pretty good. B3? 4. You sure you guys did this right? B4? B4? 3. B5? B6? 0. There we go. C1? 3. Okay. Okay. So the question here is, did that? So when we're thinking about social network analysis and we're thinking about power, there's sort of two varying ways to think about it. One, we have equal networks. So that means everybody in the network has the same power. This was not your guys' network. This network doesn't exist in real life, right? So this is an example of an equal powered network. Everybody in this network has two relationships, and they're to two different people, right? So this creates sort of an equal network. This was your guys' network. This is a non-equal network. And so, as we can see here, the poor bees on the outside who should have the fewest resources, I don't know how B2 did this, but I think B2 cheated somehow. But so what we see here is that the B's are completely dependent on the A's. So when you guys were exchanging resources, the only person B had to go to was A, right? And we can think about this in a lot of situations. We can think about this in like an employment situation, for example. So if I have a job and my employer, let's call my employer A1, has a bunch of different employees and people who want that job, that employer is going to have a lot more power over me because he's my complete dependent. I'm completely dependent on my employer, right? So we can think about this in real life terms. So in the network that you guys had, people who were on the periphery, so the B's, all the B's had the least amount of power because they were completely dependent on the A's. So when you look at this, you sort of think, well, why doesn't C have the most power? And it's because although C is sort of central to this whole thing, A has other places to go if A needs something, right? So A is not completely dependent on C. So when we're thinking about power, it has a lot to do with dependence and how dependence works in a social network. So if one actor in a network is dependent upon another, that actor is going to have less power than the actor who has multiple other people to go to. And the fun thing about this, and I'm kind of a nerdy stats guy, is that you can actually calculate this. And you can calculate the number of power, the amount of power that an actor in a social network has. And we can do this by looking at this equation here, and I'll go through each of these step by step. So we look at power where if an actor in a network has a 0, they have 0 power within a network. And absolute power really depends on the size of the network. And this can be calculated by this equation, where R equals the relationship of A is actor A, X is another actor or the other actors in the network. And then the denominator here is R, so the relationship of all the other actors that the other actor has. And I'll go through this step by step. So the top of this, the numerator, essentially asks the question, does actor A have a relationship with actor X? If yes, then you put a 1. If no, then it's 0. And the denominator, this one here, asks the question, how many relationships does actor X have? How many total relationships, including actor A? So if the other person in the network has 3 relationships, you put a 3 there, right? So I'll go into more detail what this is. So I want to calculate the power of actor 1 and actor 6 in this equal network. They're going to have the same power. So what I do here is I look at all the relationships that actor 1 has. So actor 1 has a relationship with actor 10. Actor 1 has a relationship with actor 2. And so I ask, does actor 1 have a relationship with actor 2? Yes, actor 1 does. So I give him 1 in the numerator. And then I ask, how many total relationships does actor 2 have, including including 1, excuse me. And that person has 2. So we have a 1/2 power here because it's 1 relationship divided by 2 relationships. Is that making sense to everybody? Okay. Same thing we can do for actor 6, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Then we have to do the same thing for actor 10 because there's 1 more connection there. So 10 is the same sort of thing. There's a connection there, and actor 10 has 2 relationships. So it's, again, 1/2. And then actor 1 has no other relationship. So anything divided by 0 is 0, right? And then we add these together, and that gives us our total power score for this network. So we have 1/2, we have 1/2, I'll go this side. We have 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 0 equals 1. And we can do this for every actor in a network. We can do this with your guys' network. So I'll just do this quickly. So for all the B's in this have the same amount of power. So I'm going to go back here again. So for all the B's, so B5 has a 1/3 power score with A1. And that is because, yes, they have a connection. So that's the 1 up here. And then A has 3 relationships, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. So that equals the 3. And then B5 has 0 other relationships, right? So they have a total power score of 0.33. Then we look at C1. C1 has a total power score of 1. So that's about 3 times greater, exactly 3 times greater than what the B's have. So if we kept doing this exercise, we'd end up with C1 having about 3 times more resources than B does. And then when we look at A1, and all the A's have the same power, A1 has about 7 times more power than the B's do. So if we continued this out, they'd have about 7 times more resources than the B's do. So what I'd like you guys to do is, how much time do we have? Again, break up into small groups, and you have a small little network here at the bottom of your little discussion sheet. And what I'd like you guys to do is, again, small groups of 2 to 3, calculate the power of actor A in the whole network. Scratch out that first line. That shouldn't be there. So just calculate the power actor A has in the whole network. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. And if you have any issues, please let me know, and I can come around and sort of point you in the right direction. And again, the little sociogram's on your paper. So it's this little guy here. Okay. Yeah, that's about good time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go over much of this with them. Do you still want me to pass it out? I mean, it's sort of like a Yeah, because it's sort of a more applied version of all of this. So I'll actually go through another applied example and then ask them more general questions about how to sort of use this in a real life situation, right? So if they know a network, asking the questions of like who has the most power within that network, how we can utilize that power to create changes. So that's sort of what this does. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, perfect. Here, would you guys mind sort of passing these out? I'll just sort of scatter them throughout. Thanks. I'm passing out another small worksheet, so if you don't get one, please raise your hand. Hey guys, can you pass that and take them, or take one and pass it on? Are you guys doing okay? Oh, I forgot the equation. I'm so sorry. You should have yelled at me. Sorry, guys. Here's the equation. Do you want this one? Or this one? Or the one like way before that? This one. No. This one. Okay. Sorry. My bad. And if anybody feels really left out, I have like 6 Tootsie Rolls left, so I should. Can you take that and pass them on? I'm just going to give you guys a small stack of these. How's it going for you guys? You're trying? What do you got? So you're calculating A, right? So you're asking, so you want to calculate first, you want to make the equation between A and B. So you ask, does A have a relationship with B? Now does it? So there's a connection there, right? So if there is a relationship, then you put a 1 at the top in the numerator. So that'll be for this. And then you ask, how many total connections does B have? So B has 1, and that's it. So it's 1 over 1 for that. Then you add the relationship to C. So you ask, okay, does A, so it's the same sort of thing, right? And then you just add those up. So there you go. That's it, yeah. Oh, here, I'm going to give these to you. Can you grab them and pass them down? Do you guys have... Okay, I'm just going to give you the rest of these. Can you grab them and pass them down? Okay. Okay, so who got 2 for that? Okay. It looks decent. Who had troubles with it? What do you guys have? Okay. Okay. You were confused? I'm sorry. We'll have a much more complex one in a minute. Okay, so what I want to do is put this in a real-life example for everybody and think about going back to Gamaliel Metro Chicago and the relationship to Will Davis. And let's put this back in perspective with regard to power and how power is created in a community setting, right, or in an organizational setting. And so let's sort of build the social network of Gamaliel Metro Chicago and Will Davis. And the connections here are going to be working on issues of unemployment in Chicago. So we have us, right? We have GMC. Let's say we're GMC. Then we have Representative Will Davis's office, okay? Then we have everybody that Will Davis is connected to that have to do with unemployment in Chicago. So that includes the mayor's office, that includes the Department of Civil Rights, that includes the Senate Jobs Committee, the Senate Transportation Committee. Remember this, Will Davis is a state senator, right? So he's going to have connections to these. Then we have the connections that we have, that Gamaliel Metro Chicago has. So our only connection in this whole thing is schools, is Chicago schools. So it makes sense for us to build a connection with Representative Davis's office. And then we have everybody else in this network who is also working on issues of unemployment in Chicago. So what we can do is we can do the power scores here and identify who's the most powerful person in this network. So GMC has a very low power score in the whole network. It's 0.5. And then when we look at Representative Davis's office, he has a total power score of 0.33. Or 3.33. So his power score is way higher. So it would make sense for an organization like GMC to connect with Will Davis's office, right, with regard to this issue, because Will Davis has a lot of power around this issue. And there's 2 ways to think about this, right? There's changing power in a system immediately. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. there's changing power in a system immediately, so I sort of talk about this as targeting powerful actors. And so in this case, when we're thinking about Will Davis and GMC, it would make sense for us to target Will Davis, because in this network, I've done all the calculations, Will Davis is the most powerful actor. So it makes sense for us to target him so that he can make a change, right? There's another way to think about, so we can put pressure on him to create a change there. There's another way to think about this is actually building relationships. And so that's creating relationships across the network so that we as GMC or Gamillo Metro Chicago are more powerful ourselves. So that's a little different, because now you're creating connections with other people within a network to build that power. So what I'd like to do is, you all should have a little handout here. Does everybody have the second handout that I gave? Yes, okay. So does anybody not have one, I should ask? If you guys don't have one. Are there extras? Perfect. So this class activity really sort of looks at this. And what this does, you two didn't have them? Thank you. So what we're doing in this activity, if you take a look at it, is you've been partnering with a local community action organization called Action Seattle. So in this diagram, it's organization B in the diagram on your sheet. This organization works on addressing social issues in the Seattle area. For their current initiative, Accessible Public Transportation, Action Seattle has conducted a power analysis, which has identified local power players who can make changes around the issues of public transportation. So this power analysis has created this sociogram on your paper. So get into small groups, 3 to 4, and the goal here is to, one, calculate all the different power scores for every single organization here, as well as on the back, identify which organization would you recommend Action Seattle to target to create change around transportation on the back. And then question number 2 is, which organizations would you recommend to Action Seattle to build relationships with so that they're more powerful around this issue? And so I'll give you some time to do that, and I've got to leave. So good luck. I have 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Okay, so get started. I'll walk around, and if you guys need help, please flag me down, and I'll help wherever I can. Does this make sense to you guys? It does? You guys got it? Okay. Okay. How are you guys doing here?
Still in the process.
Okay, I'll come back to you. How's that sound? How's it going with you guys? Pretty good? So I would calculate the power that Davis Street Neighborhood Association has. So where's person A? So person A, calculate the power for that person. So I would start going down that road, right? So first ask the question, who does Davis Street Neighborhood Association have a relationship to, right? So B, C, and E, exactly. So now you're going to calculate the power for for those relationships, right? So look at here. This is just an example. So we have D is Department of Transportation. So here's D. D has a relationship with F, so I calculated the score there. Has a relationship with, what's that say, E? So created the score there. And a relationship with G. And then no other relationships, right? So that total will give you the power score.
Okay.
So that's essentially where I would go with this and start moving down that line. Yeah.
What if, it doesn't have any other connections?
Then they get a 0. Yep. So, well, B's not a 0 because they have one connection, right?
Okay, but if, say, over here with your calculating F is 1, okay, so you calculated, you include
Yep.
So then C would be 1 over 2 because it's connected to A and it's connected to F.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And this would just be 1 over 1.
Wait. So with
For A.
okay, so C has a relationship with F and A, right? No. Let's take a step back real quick. So what you would do is you would look at first the relationship between C and A, right? So C has 1 because they have the relationship there, and then A has 1, 2 relationships. So the relationship there would be 1 over 2. Does that make sense? So here, let me steal this real quick. So if I'm looking at C, so C is the mayor's office. So they have a connection here.
Well, no, I'm doing A.
You're doing A. Oh, yeah. So A and C, so you have 1 over, that should be 2. Because the bottom line asks the question, how many relationships does C have? So C has a relationship with A and F. So it would be 1 over 2. Yep, exactly.
And then B would just be,
1 over 1.
that's what I was asking.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yep, you got it. And then the same thing for E. You have to calculate that relationship too. And then add those all together. Okay? How are you doing? You good? Yeah.
Would it be just one out of one?
H would be, so you ask the question, so how many relationships does just one? And then the numerator or the denominator of that, the bottom part of the equation, asks how many relationships does that person have? So if H has a relationship to E, that's going to be 1, and so that's going to be the top part of the equation. And then the bottom part of the equation asks how many other relationships does E have? So E has 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah. That's 1, 1. Yep. If E is the person that you're calculating, then that's how you do it. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
You look at C, and C has A and F, so that's 1 over 2.
Yep.
And then for this one, it only has B.
Mm-hmm.
And then for G, it only has these two, but they put 0 for that, so would you put 0 for B?
Did I have a typo there?
I don't know. 'Cause this
Oh,
one
I have a
says-
typo there. Shoot. Oh, that's not good.
Oh, okay. So would this just be 1, and then
Yeah.
this 1 over 1, 1 over 1? For
Yep.
Okay.
Here, I'll put that up. I have a typo on G. Sorry, guys. My bad. The calculations that I provided, I changed this around and I must have forgot to calculate, or I forgot to mess with the calculation. So I'll give that to you quickly. So G has a relationship with, okay, so G has a relationship with J, and then J has just one relationship with G, right? So this is J. Plus, G has a relationship with I, and then I just has one relationship with G. So that's actor I. And then plus G has one relationship with actor E, and then E has 4 relationships, right? So E has a relationship to A, D, H, and G. And then you add all those together, and that equals 2.25, or 2 1/4. So that's what that one should be. So my bad, wrong calculations. I gotta go. No, I mean everyone. Oh, you know what? I gotta take this off. Yeah, I got it. I was about to walk
Oh,
out.
yeah, where's the clip? That's on your tie. There we go.
Thanks, everyone. If you have questions about this, email me. My address is not here, but
I'll give it to
hopefully it
you.
will be provided.
If you have concerns, I will share it with you. Okay. If you want to take a few moments to finish that up, you can. Otherwise, we'll take a break now to give you. You didn't know this was a stats class today, did you? Huh? Right? Welcome, but this is psychology. You realize, I mean, this is stuff that I do all the time. I just don't give to you to do, right? But I do all of this all the time. You want to see some of my fun stuff? I'll show you some fun stuff. Really cool stuff, like eigenfaces. It's a way to do a factor analysis on faces and identify the principal components of what makes a face a face. And then I can represent anybody's face by by numbers. I can represent your face just by loadings on various numbers. So I can take a vector and I can take your face and I can represent it by a single vector of numbers, put it into a computer and have the computer reconstruct your face perfectly.
Yeah, that's how like the enhanced driver's licenses like do your face now, and like if your face is like not on the normal scale of numbers, it takes you a lot longer to receive the license.
Yeah.
And if it's normal, then you get it like 3 days.
Kind of similar to that.
Take it by like months later.
But that's the cool stuff that we do when you guys, I mean, you get the output of it, right? But we do like basic number crunching and all that. I'll bore you with it later, okay? Now take a few minutes. We're going to come back. I'll try to make some conclusions. I apologize. Don't hold that against him of having to leave here. They changed his schedule, and at 2:30 when he was supposed to be here, he has a meeting with the Vice Chancellor, so we kind of can't make him late for meeting with the Vice Chancellor, okay? So he had to leave early, but it's not his issue. It was a change in schedule that was unavoidable, okay?
Everyone's been like touching that. I wouldn't. I was like,
They're extras. They're here. Anybody want the leftover Tootsie Rolls? Did anybody have that song going through their head when he started talking about Tootsie Rolls? Let me see your Tootsie Roll. Right? I mean, I know it's older, right? It's not that I'm not cool. It's that you're too young. Okay? What's that? See? Okay, then that means that you're cool. Okay? What's up? I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to. Yeah, you can also do a double major in both if you wanted to. You can do a CJ major and a psych major. You can do, there is no psych minor. There's only a psych major. But there is a CJ minor.
Right, that's
Yep.
what I was thinking about doing.
Yeah.
CJ minor.
You can do that. You can do any
Well,
minor
the
at the
honors
university.
program came in yesterday and was talking about how it looks good for graduate school and stuff like that, but it doesn't really. I want to go into forensics and criminology,
Mhm.
so global honors really doesn't fit that as well as like a CJ minor would.
Depends what you decide you want to do.
Plus,
You can
the
do-
electives for the CJ minor coincide with the electives for the psych minor, so you're not
Or psych
doing
major.
as much or psych
Yeah.
major. You're not doing as much extra classes.
Yeah, global honors. It depends on what you're trying to get out of it, I guess is what you're going to
Yeah,
say.
well, mine
There's
would
going to be
be-
a lot that don't overlap, but the fact that you'd have to do a thesis, and your thesis you could make relevant to
Yeah,
criminal justice and psych law, right? I mean, so
yeah.
you could make it compatible, but you're right. You're going to be taking a lot of courses that aren't necessarily specifically related to that.
I wanna keep it tailored as well as I can. And I think as far as it looking good for grad school, I'm a vet, so
Well, but I mean, there's reality to the global honors helping set yourself apart more than a minor will. I guarantee that much. As far as grad school goes, global honors is going to look better than a minor is. Guarantee you that straight up. It's going to look better that way. But
I'm debating it.
but there's, I mean, you have to do what your interest is, and timeline too. Global honors may require you to take more
Yeah,
courses.
well, and that's the other thing is it's looking at an average of 2 years, and I can't apply till spring, which I'm going to be quite a bit. I'm going to be less than 2 years away.
Yeah.
So I would have to bust my ass to get it done.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to pick and choose. I think you're right on that. There's pros and cons of both. It's just deciding what's in your best interest, timeline-wise, career ambitions, everything along those lines. I mean, looking at it flat as grad school, global honors is going to be more of a benefit than a CJ minor would be, but that's only one aspect of the equation that you want to consider.
Yeah, and I mean, I looked at it. My grades are good. My class variation is good. It's all headed in the right direction. So it shouldn't technically need a huge boost to get into grad school.
Well, it's not about a boost. It's about setting yourself apart. Realize everybody, if you apply to a competitive program, everybody's going to have good grades. Everybody's going to have diverse curriculum. Everybody's going to have good GRE scores. So you're looking for something that's going to differentiate you from the pack, not make you more competitive, because everybody's going to be equally competitive. I mean, you're capped at what your GPA can be, right?
Right.
So everybody's going to be kind of equally competitive. Now it's how do I set myself apart from the rest and do something different, and that's where global honors becomes a benefit. So it's not about GPA as much as it is about something different, something you bring to the table that somebody else doesn't. So when they're looking at your application, you have something tangible that's separate from others who are applying that are similar to you in GPA, GRE, all of that stuff.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
What's up?
Oh, I was going to say, one of the things that my dad taught me when I was a kid, he was a Korean War gunny.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me when I was a kid, played so far into this, it's power perceived is power attained.
Exactly, without doubt.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about before. I mean, one of the themes of this, it's not what reality is, it's that
it's-
perception of reality that matters so much.
If you walk in looking like you're in control, everybody's going to treat you that way.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about that when we get to the issue of social influence, in the power of appearance in social influence, right? And so I believe that's chapter 7, I think, is the chapter we get to, social influence. But all of those things that your father taught you growing up, you're going to see come salient, or at least are represented in those topics in that
That's
chapter.
how the military is based. Uniform,
Without a
how
doubt.
you walk,
And we can actually talk about that to a certain extent. There's a reason why everybody is made to look the same.
Yeah.
It's because they don't want individuals.
They want,
Right? They want everybody to be the same. They want you to view yourself as part of an organization, not as an individual. And that starts from the second you get to boot camp and trimming the hair, putting you in the same attire, everything along those lines, because they want to drill that into your head. And it's all social influence, and it's going to come up.
with like fast food plates or anything like that with uniforms.
Exactly.
You're supposed to just be part of the background.
Why uniforms are now offered at school a lot of the times, because you see the influence it has on students when they're now not viewed as individuals, they're part of a larger collective. It actually affects their performance and how others view them as well. So, but that all come up in social influence. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me clarify a little bit here on this last activity, okay, which somebody have their form, because I thought there was extras, but now I don't see any extras. I just want to look at, that's okay, fine. I don't care if there's doodles here, okay? The point of this last activity, this is what he wanted me to explain to you, because he knew he was going to be out of time here, was to try to get an idea of not just going through and figuring out what these calculations are, right, and how to do these calculations. That's not the important thing, right? The important thing is then seeing how, looking at an application of this and saying if you as an individual have an end goal, right, you want to do something. And let me give you an example that is applicable to some of the work that I've been doing in the local community, okay? I mentioned to you briefly the work I do focuses on eyewitness memory. You guys did an example of that in a study that you did with me, right? One of the things that I'm actually doing right now is working with Seattle Police Department to develop new policies and procedures, okay, on how best to collect eyewitness evidence to make sure we get more accurate identifications, more accurate interviewing reports, so we don't get innocent people caught up in the system, okay? Now, in order to do that, say that's my goal. I came here to Washington with that being part of my goal, is to make change in Washington, Imagine being the GMC, right? Goal is I want to make this change, but can I do it on my own? No, I might have the knowledge, I might have some resources, I might have some connections, but I need to develop this social power in order to actually see that change come about. And so you gradually start developing the power by going to individuals who are having that can have some connection that you can use. Right? Like, so for example, I started by working with the law school because they have a connection. And then working with the Seattle Police Department. And we're making change. But our end goal is to reform policies throughout the whole state of Washington. Does that make sense? Not just in Seattle. So what are we doing? We've been in talks and we've had meetings and work sessions with a state legislator. Just like in this GMC example that he presented. Right? Why? Because that's the person with the most power. Especially since this legislator is the chair of the Public Safety Committee of the Washington State Legislature, right? So now, not only is it that he's a legislator, but he has a specific role that then affords him more power as well. Does that make sense? And now you can start seeing this change start to develop because rather than, he provided two examples of you can either grab power or try to develop a relationship to get somebody who has the power to make the change right away, right? Or you can develop the relationship to grow your own agent's power. Does that make sense? And that's what we've been slowly doing, is building those relationships to start to develop our own agent's power, where now we're much closer now, 2.5 years later, to making change than when I first came here 2.5 years ago. Does that make sense? So that's the point of him, of going through this activity and going through the other ones, is to see, how do you identify if you are an individual or if you're part of a group where you want to make a change? You want to have that effect. You see something that you think is wrong, right? Let's bring it back to something a little bit more light. You know, you wanted to bring the Sonics back to town, right? And so how do you start that? What do you do? Well, one of the things that you can start at is look at, well, who might I be able to develop a relationship with, and what type of power do they have? Right? I mean, you can view it almost a certain way of, I want to use these people, so who should I use? Yeah, that's what the Sacramento mayor is doing now. Unfortunately, he kind of waited a little bit late in the process to do that, right? But he's trying to keep the Kings there in Sacramento. You guys following this in the news? Okay. Yeah, he started to pick up 19 investors now and all that, right? But he's kind of doing the same thing of, who can I build relationships with to try to get more power, right? And that's the point of this whole demonstration here, is to see, A, how does that power perpetuate, right? How do you see certain people that you think might have more power actually don't have more power, right? Like the example that was provided in the class demonstration is the person who was the center actually didn't have the power. It was individuals that were kind of one step away, right? The intermediary between the people who had no power and somebody else who did have power actually ended up having more power, right? And now, how can you use that? You be sensitive to that, and then how can that influence your interactions and your involvement? Okay? So I believe that was his end game. Okay? I'm obviously going based upon a brief conversation I had with him about it, and I am not a community psychologist like he is, so he obviously has a much more nuanced understanding of that than I do. Questions on that? Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to make yourself more powerful rather than using somebody else's power? Because in the long term, if that relationship is like severed, then you're out of so-called power.
What do you guys think? Did you hear what he had asked? His question was, wouldn't you want to go the route of trying to build your own power rather than forming a relationship with somebody else who's in power? Because then in the long run, if that relationship gets severed, you've stood on your own, you can stand on your own 2 feet. Is that, am I paraphrasing well?
Yeah, but I think having a relationship with that person would take the resources, which is making you more powerful, so when that's gone, you still have the resources they give you.
Okay, so maybe that's another perspective, is that in the process of building that relationship, you're actually gaining power because you're gaining those resources, that even if they do sever, you have those resources available. What do you think? Yeah. Or you can do both. right? In the process of gaining power with somebody else, are you kind of, or establishing power, or establishing a relationship with somebody who has power, are you effectively gaining power yourself? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, because on the diagram it has, because that sounds like on the diagram, once you make a connection with somebody that has 3 connections, from that theory, it's like that automatically makes you connected to those 3 others that they're connected to, but you're not really, you're just connected to that one.
Right? Okay, so if I establish that relationship with just that one, I don't gain the power. But what if I do? How many of you seen the movie Blow? Right? Okay. About drug dealers, right? Johnny Depp is a drug dealer. Okay. Right? But let's think about, for those that have seen the movie, this is an analogy like in that movie. What if you do both? I establish that relationship to get the immediate end game, but then I go behind Pablo's back, right? Or actually I don't remember what the other character did, but he went behind Johnny Depp's back, what his name was, right? Went behind Johnny Depp's back to Pablo and formed those connections that he only had through Johnny Depp. Does that make sense? Right? So now I get the benefit of forming that immediate relationship with somebody in power is what? Immediate resources. That's the benefit, right? If my goal is I need this change now, I go to the person that can affect the change immediately. But long term, if I lose that relationship, I lose that power, right? Because I don't actually have the power. I just have a connection with somebody who has the power, right? But if I do the sneaky way of I get those immediate resources, then I go behind the back and form the other relationships, then what can I effectively do with that person? I can cut them off. And according to this model, too, how does that affect their power? It lessens their power because the people they're connected with are now connected with me, so now there's one more connection in that denominator, right? Which then makes their power less. Does that make sense? Right? So, but it begs the question, if you don't want to be the sneaky person, right? What should you do? Go try to gradually build the power yourself, or just build a relationship with somebody in power? And the question that you're going to have to ask yourself at that point in time is what? Well, yeah, but what do you want in regards to what? I'm sorry? Well, I guess, but the question is, because one is going to give you more power, but the other is going to give you what? Instant results, right? More immediate resources, right? So if I build that connection with the person in power right now, rather than gradually build my power, right? By gradually building my power, I get long-term rewards at short-term loss. Does that make sense? Rather, if I build the relationship with the person who's in power right now, I don't necessarily get those long-term benefits of having the power myself, but I reap immediate results. Does that make sense? Right? So to answer your question then is, depends what's most important. Do I need change now? Or can I wait and build and get that change through me gaining power? Yeah?
You can do both without being sneaky.
Of course you can.
Where all the people in power are is fundraisers and mixers and galas and, all of those things. That's what they're designed for.
Exactly.
People to meet other people's connections.
Exactly. Right? I mean, so you don't have to be, it's more fun when we think about it, sneaky and backstabbing and all that, right? How many of you are thinking to go to grad school? Okay, so over half of you raised your hand, at least that I could identify. Okay? I have some of my undergrads going to our next conference in a couple months. Okay? I tell them the most important thing as an undergrad or a grad student at a conference is not going to the poster sessions and the talks. The conference begins at 5 o'clock. Why does the conference begin at 5 o'clock? Oh, no, I'm not talking about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm saying the conference begins at all day sessions are done. The conference actually begins after the conference sessions are done. Why? Because it's all about networking. It's all about this power grab. It's about meeting people and building those connections and building your power as a student. Because the whole end result is I want to get into a good grad school. So when an undergrad going to a conference, I better be networking and building these connections to build this power. Right? And then when you're in grad school, what's your end game? Get a job. Right? There's not a lot of jobs out there, and there's a hell of a lot of grad students. Okay? So you go into these conferences to build relationships. right? Plus, it's a great way to explain to your wife why you're out at the bar till 1 in the morning. Okay? Because I'm networking. I'm building relationships. Okay? It's the way to do it. And it all comes back to, well, you don't have it there, but that example. This little thing is a way to represent how important it is to have power and how power develops. Okay? Questions? Thoughts? No? You want to move on to chapter 4 stuff? Yeah. According to this model, what would that suggest? It would take away power, right? Unless I'm building connections with people that weren't already part of that network. Does that make sense? If I start building connections and bringing people into the network, it might benefit everybody. Does that make sense? But if I just start building connections with the people who are already in the network, there's only so much power that can go around. And if the more connections that are in the network, the less power any one person has in that network. Does that make sense? Right? So it will take power away if you're just building connections with other people in the network. Does that make sense? Because, and think about it that way, the more connected the people are in a network, the less influence any one person has in that network. Does that make sense? Right? So that's the premise of that there. Like I said, I am not an expert in this area, but he volunteered. I will email you his email address. I'll provide it on Canvas, and if you have questions for him, please contact him. Okay? Related to that, I'm also going to email you later tonight the last of the surveys. Thank you for those that have taken time to evaluate our first 2 candidates. I will send you information on a link to a survey on him, and I'll actually send you 2 links. One will be the same survey of evaluating Mr. Collins here, okay? And then the second one that I send you will be another very short one that just asks you to rank order the candidates, okay? And of course, it'll provide you the opportunity to write comparative evaluations as well. Like if you say, the reason why I put this one first is because I thought that they were so much better than the other 2 or whatever it might be, okay? But please, if you can provide that feedback, we'd greatly appreciate it. By 6 p.m. tomorrow is the cutoff for that. Okay? We as a faculty will be meeting on Friday morning to begin the process and hopefully reach a decision on who we would like to offer the position to. Okay? Like I said, your perspectives are greatly appreciated in that process. I understand that it's time out of your schedule to do it. Definitely appreciate it. And I hope that you're view it as I'm being sincere when I say we do read your responses and they are considered in the process. Okay? Doesn't mean that who you pick as a collective is who we're going to go with, but it's definitely a significant consideration in our discussions. Okay? Any questions on that? No? All right, this topic of power is going to come up later on when we get to like chapter 7, I believe, when we start talking about social influence. This will all start coming back. The power of the individual and how the individual can influence a person, how an institution can influence a person, so an organization, and how does that have an effect on an individual. What we want to focus on today, excuse me, is continuing our discussion of chapter 4. We're likely not to get through all of chapter 4 today, so we'll probably finish up some of chapter 4 on Monday. Okay? But I want to ask you this here. Another true or false question. Adaptively. Now, of course, there's always going to be variability on this, okay? But we just want to say in general, okay? People are skilled at knowing when somebody is lying. What do you guys think is true or false? Think about for yourself. Are you pretty good at determining if somebody's lying? No? So you say, are people good at telling if somebody's lying? Is that true? How many say true? How many say false? How many haven't taken one of my classes before? Okay, don't answer. All right? The reality is what? False. We're not good at detecting deception. All right? Do you think there's some people that are really good at detecting deception? Who are they? So liars are good at telling if somebody else is lying. So a psychopath might be good at detecting deception. Who lies a lot? Politicians? They're good. Lawyers? What about criminals? What about cops? Are cops good at detecting deception? FBI agents? Better than we are? But are they good? Right? No? You don't think so? My brother swears he's good at it. He's a cop, right? He's a cop. He knows. I know when you're lying to me, right? So what do you think? And when I say, what's the best? If 100% is perfectly accurate all the time, how accurate do you think cops are? 65%? Isn't that pretty low? How accurate do you think you are? 50%? Why? Because you read the book? Because you took cognitive, right? You guys think you're 50% accurate? How many think better than 50%? How many think worse than 50%? Okay, do you realize what 50% is? It's flipping a coin. So you're saying that you're worse than flipping a coin? So if somebody comes up and says, is that person lying to me? You're better off just saying heads yes, tails no, rather than relying on your assessment? Depends if you know them or not, okay? Yeah, that does matter to a certain extent, okay? Well, what we know is that we're not good at it. And the main reason we're not good at it is why? We look at the wrong cues. What do you guys look at to determine if somebody's lying to you? What are some of the cues to deception? Eye contact. What about eye contact? They're lying? Okay, so if they avoid eye contact, they're lying. Okay, what's another cue to deception? Voice fluctuation. So I'm lying to you a lot when I go through my puberty moments up here in the front, okay? All right, so voice cracking or pitch or things of that sort. I thought I heard something fidgety. Did I hear fidgety as well? Okay, so if a person is fidgety, they're lying. Sweating, they're lying. If they get on the defensive and they accuse you, they're lying. If they're too still. So if they're both fidgety and too still, they're lying. If they both make too much eye contact and no eye contact, they're lying. If they look up and to the left, they're lying. Right? Have you heard those? Right? The reality of it, though, is that none of those are good indicators. Okay? But we tend to think so. Freud used to sit there and say, no mortal can keep a secret. For betrayal oozes out of every pore, right? We tend to think this, okay? But the reality is, there is no Pinocchio's nose. There is no cue to deception. Single cue that works for everybody. It just does not exist, okay? But we tend to rely on this, okay? And we look at ability to catch a liar. Now, the key thing to point out here is 50% is flipping a coin. College students, CIA, FBI, military, right? We're only talking 55% ability. That's 5% better than flipping a coin at detecting deception. But, you guys might think, I know I'm not good at it, but do cops think they're good? Think somebody from the CIA thinks they're good at it? How many seen Meet the Parents? Right? Was Robert De Niro good at lying or detecting deception? Right? He was like a human lie detector. At least that's how he was presented in the movie, right? But what we tend to find is that nobody's really good at it, and even the best people aren't that great. Does that make sense? But this gets into that notion of person perception, of relying on these cues to try to know something about a person. Right? These external elements. Last class we talked a little bit about facial features, right? And that now if I just make a racial categorization, I all of a sudden now read traits into a face. Right? I showed you those pictures there that we had of if I gave them a Hispanic hairstyle or a black hairstyle, now all of a sudden participants rated skin tone differences. They rated difference in personality characteristics, all on the basis of that simple categorization. Right? Those initial, immediate, first impressions go a long way, and we rely on them. All right? But what we want to focus on today, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time here talking about this, because the reality is, if you want to know a lot more about deception detection, take T-Psych 250, course in cognitive psychology, or take T-Psych 422, psychology and law. Okay? Those two courses, I go a lot more detail into detecting deception, right? We can't rely on behavioral cues to determine if somebody's lying or telling the truth because they just don't work for a variety of reasons. But we are developing better techniques that don't rely on behavioral cues. And take T-Psych 250 to find out what they are. Okay? See, I'm pitching, I'm selling. Okay? It's still, by far, you can ask the students, it's the best course you'll ever take in your life. Okay? Better than this course. Okay? But we want to go from here. We don't want to focus our energies just on that first impression that we make of somebody. What we focus on, what we look at. Right? We don't just want to focus on that. We want to say, what do we do from there? Right? We talked, how quickly do we make this first impression of people? It's a snap judgment, right? And how quickly was some of the data that we showed suggest that snap judgment could be so quickly, as quick as what? Less than half a second, like a tenth of a second. We could make these snap judgments of people, right? But these are our first impressions, right? First impressions we talk about, they hold a lot of weight, right? But we often can adjust them accordingly, right? And we'll take into account, we'll get a first impression of somebody, and then we'll also look at what of them. We'll form a first impression of somebody, but then to really try to learn something about them, we're going to rely on what? Their behavior. We're going to make some observation of that person. Does that make sense? Right? And so at that point, we're talking about, and I look at that behavior, and what am I trying to deduce about that person? Well, not just if I'm accurate, but I'm trying to learn something about them. I'm trying to reach some judgment of what? Their character, of who they are. Does that make sense? Not just what they are. Right? The elements thing is kind of an issue of what they are, right? What's their ethnicity? Right? How attractive are they? Right? Those snap judgments, okay, they're lying to me right now. Right? But if I identify somebody as lying to me right now, does that mean that I make an attribution of them that they're a liar? Not necessarily, right? Okay. This next step in person perception is what we call the attribution phase. Of where now I want to go from just observing characteristics of this person, what we call the elements, to making judgments about their disposition. And what's a disposition? Yeah, their personality. Something about their character, who they are. Does that make sense? That's what we're going to talk about next. And that process is called attribution. Okay? The process of attribution is that I look at a behavior and I make an attribution about why are they performing that behavior. Does that make sense? I attribute that behavior to a source. And what can be the two sources of the behavior? Okay, so it could be something about that person, or it could be something about what? The situation or the environment, right? So there's two reasons why somebody can perform a specific behavior, right? Either it's something about them, or it's something about their environment. Does that make sense? Right? And the process of determining that is called attribution. All right? So that's what we want to focus on here today. We want to talk about some attribution theories. And how do we go about making those decisions of, is this person behaving this way because it's something about them as a person, an individual, it's something about their character? Or is it something about the environment? Does that make sense? And we already talked about this, okay? That we have these two categories, personal attributions and situational. And if I make a personal attribution, what am I saying? It's internal. So I'm saying what? That they're behaving a certain way because it's them. Exactly, right? Its behavior is due to something about that person. Let's think about it this way. Okay? How many of you drove here today? Okay, the majority of you drove here today. Okay? Say that you're driving down I-5 from whatever direction you're coming, right? And as you go to get close to your exit, right, as you're getting in the exit, all of a sudden somebody comes up and cuts off right in front of you to pull over into the exit, right? What did you just observe? Very interesting. What did you observe? Let's not focus on, what did you observe? Somebody cut you off, right? But now, what do I need to do? Flip them off, okay? Right? Do I want to determine their disposition, or what do I want to do? I observe a behavior, and what do I want to do? I want to decide why it happened. I want to say, why did this person behave this way? Now, it's interesting, okay? Caitlin made what type of attribution? A personal, okay? He cut me off because he's an asshole, okay? But did anybody else think maybe it was a situational factor? What was your first thought of why he cut you off? Probably almost missed his exit, okay? And why maybe he almost missed his exit? Lost track of time, forgot where he's going. Maybe he's running late for work. Maybe his wife is in labor and he's in a hurry. True story. I got here last year, a year ago tomorrow. My son turns a year tomorrow. Okay? A year ago tomorrow, I went to work. I got here at about 6 in the morning. I am sitting at Tacoma Dome Station waiting to catch the light rail to come to campus. Right? And my wife calls me and says, hey, we're having the baby now. And we live in Seattle. Okay? So I got to get from Tacoma to Seattle. Right? And at 6 in the morning, at 6:15 at that point, how is traffic from going to Tacoma to Seattle? Not that good, right? Okay? So what did I do on the way home? I sped. I drove like crap. I drove down the shoulder, cutting off cars that are waiting in line for this and all that stuff. And I figure I get to the point, I get pulled over by a cop, I just sit there and say, dude, my wife's in labor. Give me a ticket if you want to, but I'm trying to get home. My wife, I'm gonna have a kid today. Okay, yeah, my wife's gonna have a kid today. But so now the people that I'm cutting off, basically, as I'm going, what are they likely saying about me? That I'm an ass, right? Okay, that's probably what they're saying, right? But was there a situational reason to explain my behavior? Right? So there was a situational, well, that's probably a little bit of both with it being me, okay? All right? But we can also make situational attributions about people. We're going to come back to this, okay? Your response was perfect. I couldn't ask for a better response, okay? Because we're going to come back to this and say, well, what type of attributions are we most likely to make and why? Right? And things along those lines, okay? But we can make one of these two. Is it due to something specific? Is he an ass? Or did he just lose track of time? Is he running late for work? Right? Or is his wife in labor? Right? Is it something about the environment? Did he just get, the engine on fire indicator in his car? He needed to get off the highway as quickly as possible, right? Okay? Something along those lines. Yeah, Janice.
Oh my God, this guy's so stupid, so it's like...
Gee, we think differently about ourselves than others? Right? If you guys do well in this class, it's because what?
You're so smart.
You're so smart and you studied so well. If you do poorly in this class, it's because he's a horrible teacher. Right? Different when it's about yourself than about others, right? Okay, we're going to come back to that in a second, okay? So, there's two basic theories as to how we go about forming these attributions. And I want you to be familiar with both of these. Okay, so we're going to take some time talking about these. And I want you not only to be familiar with them, but also to kind of explain what are some of the similarities in these theories and what are some of the inconsistencies or discrepancies across them as well. Okay? And really what it boils down to, and I'll just tell you right now, one of the big differences between both of these theories are ways in which we go about trying to make a judgment about a person, whether their behavior is something about them or about their environment. Okay? In Jones correspondent inference theory, I'm making that judgment based upon a single data point. I observe a single behavior, and I have to try to make a judgment about that person. Does that make sense? In Kelly's covariation theory, I look at multiple data points, multiple behaviors. Okay? That's a big distinction between the two. And you're going to see that as we go through. Okay? So in correspondent inference theory, it says that we try to make an attribution of somebody. And again, an attribution is what? An opinion of what? The cause of the behavior. Okay? That's what an attribution is. It's my perspective as to why they behave that way. Okay? And I can make which one of two types of attributions? What are they? Personal, if I say that the behavior is due to internal factors of that person, something about them. Or I can make what other type of attribution? Situational. It's not about them, it's about the environment. Exactly. Good job. Okay? So, this is a theory of, okay, when we try to make these inferences, all right, I'm going to make it based upon three factors. Again, I'm looking at a single behavior, and I say, okay, why did that guy cut me off this morning? Right? I'm going to look at three things. One, I'm going to look at the person's degree of choice. Let me ask you, if you find out that somebody had a choice and they behaved a certain way, are you more likely to make a personal or situational attribution? Why? They had the choice not to. Right? Okay. If you find out the person did not have a choice, what are you more likely to do? An environment. Right? A situational attribution. Because you say, they didn't have a choice. They could be the nicest person in the world, but they had to do this because of the environment. Does that make sense? All right? Think about it. Anybody ever watched the movie Saw? Right? Okay. Remember the scene where the girl's got like the reverse bear trap on her head? Right? And the only way that she can survive is if she does what? Cuts the key out of the guy's stomach. Right? Okay. If you never saw Saw, it's a sick movie. Okay? Right? Would you say that she's a horrible, murderous person? You would say what? Did she have a choice? She could have died. So did she? I mean, she had a choice, but was it really a choice? No. So she did that behavior because of the situational thing. Okay? That's the example there. That's an example of it. Okay? So you want to look and say, did this person have a choice or not? Okay? The next thing I want to look at is how expected is the behavior. All right? If the behavior is unexpected, what am I more likely to make? A personal or situational attribution? A personal one, right? Okay. Let's say that I came to class one day and I decided, say earlier today when he started handing out Tootsie Rolls, and I had that song going through my head of, let me see that Tootsie Roll. Okay. All right. Say that as I was doing that, I just decided to like get up on the table and start dancing like I was at the club. Okay? Is that an expected behavior? No? So you're likely to make what type of attribution? Personal attribution about me, right? Okay. So the expectedness of the behavior. Did the person have a choice? And how expected is the behavior? Those are two things I'm going to look at. If it's an unexpected behavior, what type of attribution am I likely to make? Personal. It's expected, I'm more likely to make a situation. Let me give you an example. If we're walking out and I open up the door for you, what type of attribution are you likely to make? Are you going to think that it's some enduring trait about me? No. You're going to say, okay, he opened the door, but what? The norm is that you open the door for somebody else. So it's just a norm. It's not that he's anything special, right? It's the norm. It's the social norm to open the door. Does that make sense? Another example of this, and let me give you a good example of this. I use a lot of personal examples, and I apologize, but I don't know you well enough to use your examples. Okay? Anybody ever been to El Paso, Texas? Okay? My apologies, okay? I lived there, I went to grad school there, and one of the first things that annoyed the hell out of me in El Paso, Texas is as I'm on campus and I'm walking upstairs Okay? What side of a hallway or what side of stairs do you walk up? The right side, right? Okay? The right side. It's called the right for a reason because it's correct. Okay? That's what we do. But the norm there is you walk on the left. It's just the cultural, social norm. Okay? Right? So I'm sitting there and I first get there and I'm trying to walk up the right side of the stairs. Right? I have people coming in and like I got to move out of the way and all that. And what am I saying? Jerks. Why? Because their behavior is unexpected. Does that make sense? Once I learned the cultural norm, then I said, okay, they're not jerks, they're just expected to do it. It's an expected behavior, so it's just something about their environment, the social norm. It's not something about them. Does that make sense? Right? So that's what we mean. Unexpected behavior is more likely to be a personal attribution. Okay? Lastly, so I look at their choice. Did it look like they had a choice to engage in this behavior or not? Is the behavior expected or not? And then finally, were there intended effects or consequences of this behavior? Right? Were the effects or consequences obvious? Right? Or were these consequences of this behavior not foreseeable? If the consequences of the behavior are foreseeable, what am I likely to do? Make a personal attribution, right? Okay? Whereas if the consequences of the behavior are not foreseeable, I'm more likely to do what? Make a situational. Does that make sense? So let's think about it here of, here's an example, okay? You guys have heard about the woman, 2 people now in New York City that got pushed in front of subway trains? Okay? We're going to talk about this later in the quarter of why didn't anybody help? Especially the first guy was on the track for like 19 seconds and nobody tried to get him off the track before the train ran him over. Okay? We'll talk about that later on, why nobody helped. And interestingly, the same thing happened in Madrid just the other day, where a woman passed out, fell onto the train tracks, and somebody hopped down there and dragged her to safety before the train came into the station and ran her over. And when we get to that section on helping, we'll try to understand, well, why in that case did people jump in and help, but in New York City they didn't? Well, maybe. We'll look at that later on when we get to the chapter on helping. Okay? But let's focus here on this of saying, we heard about those people getting pushed in front of trains in New York City. Right? You hear that the woman who's been arrested in the one case has confessed and said that she intentionally pushed the person in front of a train because she had a bad day. Okay? That's what she said. All right? You look at her behavior, and were the intended consequences obvious? Right? There was an intent to push the guy in front of the train, and is it obvious that the consequences are going to be this person was going to get hit by a train and die? Okay, so you're more likely to make what type of attribution? Personal, that there's something wrong with this woman. Right? Now let's say that I'm at the train station again. Okay? Let's say, this is interesting, I actually saw this on a video from Australia a few years ago. Okay? Say that I'm in a hurry, I'm brushing through a crowded train platform, and I bump into a woman, and it hits her stroller, and the stroller goes and falls on the train track and gets hit by the train. Is my behavior, were the consequences intended or obvious? So what type of attribution are you likely to make about me bumping into this woman? Situational. Maybe it was just something, he was in a hurry, something like that, right? Do you see the difference there? Now, the cool thing about this is that kid got hit by the train, got dragged a whole distance, the carriage got stuck underneath the train. Kid was okay. Nothing wrong. Best advertisement for that stroller ever, right? I mean, the kid was okay. You guys, there's video of it. I mean, and it happened instantaneously. This stroller went over and the train hit like 2 seconds later. There was no chance of trying to get the kid off the track. And then, of course, you see the mother freaking out like crazy. And then they go and they get the kid out from underneath the train, and the kid's just sitting there chilling in his car seat. You know, like, hey, man, this is cool. All right, this don't happen every day? Okay. But this is what Jones correspondent inference theory is suggesting. Okay? That I will look at a single behavior, and I will look to see what is that person's degree of choice for engaging in this behavior? How expected is this behavior? And were the effects of this behavior obvious beforehand? Does that make sense? And I'll evaluate these. All right? And then I will make a judgment as to whether this person engaged in this behavior because of something about them or if it's more likely due to the environment. Does that make sense? Right? Does it make sense how each of these can interact? Right? Like how choice, does it make sense that if a person has a choice, you're more likely to make a personal attribution? Yeah. Does it make sense that if the behavior is expected, you're more likely to make a situational attribution? Right? Okay. So it makes sense there on that. All right? So let me give you an example of this. This is one of the most famous studies that's ever been done. Okay? I mean, it's ridiculously famous. It's from the, 50s, right? 67, 67. All right? And this is done by Jones and Harris. Okay? And what they wanted to look at here was what type of attribution did people form about the student who gave the speech? Okay, so I observe a behavior, a student giving a speech, and I want to see how did the observers attribute that speech? Okay, was it something about the individual or something about the environment? In the speech that they had to give the topic that they give a speech on was Fidel Castro. You guys know Fidel? Okay, now think of the time at this, 1967. What happened around that time? I know it's a history lesson. Cuban Missile Crisis, exactly, right? Where the commies had sent missiles over to Cuba, right? And now we had missiles in our backyard aimed at the eastern seaboard and ready to do a whole nuclear holocaust, right? So were attitudes in the U.S. towards Cuba and towards Fidel Castro high or low? Low, right? Okay, most people did not have a positive view of Fidel Castro, especially if you lived in Miami. Okay, even go today to Miami, don't say anything positive about Fidel Castro. You might not wake up in the morning, okay? A lot of Cuban immigrants in Miami. You don't want to be talking positive about Fidel Castro. Ask Ozzie Guillen for those baseball fans around here. Okay? But what happened here is that now, say I brought you in, and I said, I want you to give a speech on Castro. But I'm going to tell you whether you have to give a speech that is in support of Castro or a speech that is against Castro. Does that make sense? So you don't get to pick what you want to say. You get to pick kind of what you want to say, but I tell you if it needs to be pro or anti-Castro. Does that make sense? So does this speech actually represent your true feelings? Not necessarily, right? If you happen to get assigned the side that is your true feeling, maybe it will, right? But so basically the point here is, who has the choice? Me telling you. Do you have a choice? No. Okay, that's a key thing here, okay? And then they gave the speeches, okay? And they wanted to have people rate, how much does this person believe Castro? Does that make sense? Or how much does this person like Castro? And people were told, the raters were told, say you gave up and gave your speech, half of the raters were told this person chose to give the speech they gave. Does that make sense? And the other half were told the truth, that this person was told to give one side or the other. Does that make sense? They didn't have a choice. All right? And what did they identify? What the rating is here, okay? The rating here is that to what extent is this speech a product of this person's true belief? So that would be what type of attribution? A personal attribution, right? To what extent is their behavior, giving this speech, a product of something about them, how they truly believe? Does that make sense? And what we see here, an important thing we want to look at first is this box here, or this set of columns here. Okay? This is students, or the raters were told this person chose to give this speech. Does that make sense? And what do we find? If I think that you chose to give a speech that is pro-Castro, I make a personal attribution that you have really high pro-Castro ratings. Does that make sense? If I think you chose to give a speech that is anti-Castro, I make a personal attribution that you probably have pretty negative attitudes towards Castro. Does that make sense? So if I think that you had a choice, I then take your behavior as an indication of something about you. Is that surprising? No? Okay. Well, let's look now at this box. Okay? And what we want to look at here is the difference. Now here, these people are told that this student was assigned the position. It's the same speech that they read, or that they heard. Okay? They're just told this was assigned. Now, all of a sudden, Do I think that you had a choice in giving the speech? No, I'm told that you assigned it. Well, now all of a sudden, I don't use what you said in the speech as an indicator of how you truly feel. Because I say, your speech is likely a product of the environment, right? So now all of a sudden, this is the same speech, mind you. Look at the difference here between this one and this one, right? My rating is now lower. I'm making less of a personal attribution of your attitudes towards Castro. And again, the same thing here. Look at the difference between here and here. I don't think you're as negative in your true feelings towards Castro, and I don't think you're as positive in your true feelings towards Castro, because I know you were forced to write this speech. You didn't pick whether you wanted to write pro or anti-Castro. Does that make sense? This demonstrates how choice is used when forming attributions of others. If I think you have a choice, I'm going to say your behavior is likely indicative of who you really are. If I don't think you had a choice, I'm going to say your behavior is, at least in part, a product of the environment because you were told you had to do something. Does that make sense? Now, we're going to come back to this in a few minutes. Okay? The same exact study, because this also demonstrates something else that's really interesting. The most pervasive error in all of social psychology. All right? So that's correspondent inference theory. What does it argue? It says that we make judgments about a person or about the source of a behavior based upon what? Based upon a single behavior, in our evaluation of that behavior on what? 3 factors. And what are those 3 factors? Choice, expectedness, and if I think the consequences were foreseeable or intended. Okay? Good job. Does that make sense? You feel good about that one? Excellent job. You guys seem to be spot on with this. You're either great students or I'm a great teacher. Okay? I know, but I'm happy that you are. I love this. This is great. Okay? Kelly's covariation principle, or covariation theory, okay, argues differently. It says that we don't make judgments on the basis of a single behavior. Rather, we do what? We look at lots of behaviors to try to make a judgment about any one particular behavior. Does that make sense? We're still making a judgment of a single behavior, but we use other behaviors to help us learn something about this behavior. Does that make sense? Right? Because we don't operate in a world in which we only see one behavior. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. We have memory of experiencing others behaving in a similar situation. Right? So we're going to use that knowledge to help us infer whether this behavior is due to the person or the environment. Does that make sense? And we do that based upon the covariation principle. All right? And what this argues, okay, well, you guys know what covariation means? More than one variation. That's good. Okay? That's excellent. Okay? But what does that mean now? Whether things vary together. Whether things occur together and don't occur together. Does that make sense? That's what covariation is. Not just more than one variation, but whether is the presence of something always accompanied by the presence of something else. Does that make sense? Is its absence accompanied by the absence of that other thing? Or things could covary where the presence of one means the absence of another. Does that make sense? But covariation just means that as there's change in one, there's change in another. Does that make sense? That's what covariation is. And in this theory, there's 3 kinds of covariation that we take, that we focus on. Okay? These are consensus, distinctiveness, and consistency. Now, a lot of times I try to use different examples than what's in the book to give you different perspectives, but I found through multiple sections of teaching this course that one example that's kind of overlaps with the book is a really good example for this Kelly's covariation theory. Now, the biggest problem that we have with this, though, is that my example got ruined by that, whatever his name is, Liam Hemsworth, is that the name of the guy? Okay. Got ruined by that son of a bitch in his remake of Red Dawn. Okay? Because the first Red Dawn is awesome. And if you haven't seen it, go rent it. Okay? But now there's this new one and it ruins it for me. So now I have to pick a different movie. All right? And so in the process of trying to pick a different movie, I decided just today, and I have no idea why I decided this, that the movie we're going to be talking about is Dude, Where's My Car? Okay? I have no idea why it popped into my head. But it works. Imagine now that you're sitting there back in, 1996. So actually, some of you may not have been able to sit in 1996. I don't know. But imagine that you're like me and you're in college, okay? All right? And you're in college in 1996. Maybe we can talk about Hot Tub Time Machine, okay? You went back to 1996, okay? All right? And you're sitting there outside of the movie theater, and you see me come out of the movie theater, and I'm just like, that is the greatest film of all time. Dude, what's mine say? Sweet, what's mine say? Dude, what's mine say? Okay, like I'm just so excited that Dude, Where's My Car is the greatest film of all time. Anybody agree with me? Okay. So now you're sitting there and you're there to watch, I don't know, Titanic or something else that was out around the time. Okay? Your heart will go on, okay? All right? You're there to watch Titanic, and now you're sitting there saying, wow, okay. You're trying to make a judgment of what? Is Dude, Where's My Car a really great film and I should go see that instead of Titanic? Or what? Is this person just an idiot? Okay? So you're trying to form what? What are you trying to form? An attribution, right? You're trying to form an attribution about that behavior. The behavior is saying this was an awesome film, and now you have to say, is this a personal attribution that this person is just an idiot? Or is it a situational attribution in what? The film is probably really good. Does that make sense? Is it a product of the environment or is it a product of the individual? Okay? And it argues then that you're going to rely on this covariation principle, where you're going to look at consensus. Right? And consensus is, how are other people reacting to that same stimulus? Right? You sit there and say, wow, this first person barges out of the door and is laughing hysterically, saying this is the greatest film of all time. If I want to look for consensus, what else am I going to look at? So I'm in that exact moment, what else am I going to look at? Other people walking out of that same movie theater. Are they reacting the same way? Does that make sense? If they are reacting the same way, we can say there is consensus. And if there is consensus, what am I likely to say? It's situational. It's a good movie. Does that make sense? So that's the first thing I'm going to look at. The second thing is distinctiveness. Right? So maybe you're going to come up to me and you're going to say, wow, is that a good film? What other films do you like? Does that make sense? And if I just sit there and I say, hey, I love just about every movie. I mean, every week I come to the movie and it's the best movie I've ever seen. Right? What are you likely to say? A personal attribution. It's not this film. There's just something weird about this guy. Right? Whereas if I sit there and say, man, I hate movies. I don't know what it was about this one. This one just got me. This was hilarious. It was a great film. You're likely to say then what? Situational. It must be something about the film. Does that make sense? That's what distinctiveness is. Does that person react the same way or differently to different stimuli? Does that make sense? Right? Lastly, I want to look at consistency. So if distinctiveness is how does that person react to different stimuli, consistency is what? How they react to the same stimuli when? Over time. Right? I want to look at consistency, okay? Is the person's behavior consistent over time? So if you sit there and you see me a week later, and you come up and say, do you still like Dude, Where's My Car? Or you saw it a second time, do you still think that's a great film? And I say, yes, it's hilarious, it's the best film ever. What are you likely to make? Situational, because over time I still say I'm consistent. It's consistently a good film. Right? Whereas if I sit there and say, no, man, it's such a stupid movie. That night, turns out that my roommate had made some special brownies and I had eaten them before the movie, and that's what was going on. I'm likely to make what? Personal. Does that make sense? Right? Well, yeah, to a certain extent it would be, yeah, but it's not a product, I guess, of the movie. It's a product of the individual. I guess that's what we want to say there, right? It's a product of that transient state of that individual. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's Kelly's covariation theory. It argues that we're going to make these personal or situational attributions based upon these other things. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is that this in here, these are both the same, high and high. You see that? Okay? So don't get confused that basically it's saying we take into account all of them at the same time. We don't just take into account one or the other. Does that make sense? So we're going to take into account all of them at the same time. So let me give you an example here. I put it up there, but let me put it on here. So consensus-wise, okay? I see the stranger raving about this film. All right? And I look and see, are other people raving about this film too? If there's not consensus, I'm more likely to make a personal attribution. Does that make sense? If there is consensus that other people do rave, I'm more likely to say it's a product of the stimulus. It's a product of the film. It's just a good film. Does that make sense? I'm going to look at distinctiveness. Does this person rave about a lot of other films? If so, well, it's not a product of the stimulus. It's just this is the type of person that thinks all movies are great. Does that make sense? Okay? Whereas if this person says, no, I don't like many films, but this one I really liked, it's a product of the stimulus. Does that make sense? The last thing here I want to point out, and this is what I was saying, here it says both of these are high. Okay? What this demonstrates here, okay, is that if I have high consistency, I'm likely to sit there and say, okay, it's a product of either the person or the stimulus, depending upon what happened with these other two. Does that make sense? All right? If I get low consistency, what I might get is like a third box here, where maybe now it's not a product of other. Rather, it's a product that's supposed to be ENVIR. Okay? One thing I love, did you notice his handwriting's as awful as mine? All right? I don't feel as bad. Okay? But if I have low consistency, I might say, I can't tell if it's a product of the person or of the movie or of something else in the environment, like the fact that I had special brownies. Does that make sense? Right? So it's difficult to know. But I'm not going to make a personal attribution, but I might not make a stimulus attribution as well. I might say it could be due to something else, and I need to collect more data. Yeah?
Isn't this what we do when we first start dating anybody?
Well,
You see how they are around your friends and are around your family, and when you see discrepancies come up, you see if it was situational or personal, and then if it's something that you choose the right flag when it's all about the person and not that situation.
are you trying to, when you first start dating somebody, trying to use their behavior to try to determine if you can figure out something about them as a person? So is this what you would be doing at that time? Right? You'd be forming attributions. Say, I don't know this person well. I'm going to use their behavior to try to form attributions, personal attributions. Like, can I learn something about this person based upon their behavior? So, yeah, this is what we're going to be doing. Right? We're always taking notes when you first start meeting somebody or first start dating somebody. Right? Does that make sense? Okay? And we're going to do this across multiple behaviors now, though. We're talking right now, we have a singular behavior that we're trying to form the attribution. But when we're dealing with somebody on that type of basis, we're making multiple attributions of their behavior. Does that make sense? Questions on this? Is this clear? Is this good? Yeah? I feel like you guys are getting it, and I hope it's just not me like reading you wrong, because I really feel like you're getting it, which is good, because these aren't usually really clear for people to grasp the first time we go over them. So I am a little proud of you for this, okay? All right, the next thing I want to talk about here, I don't really want to focus on cognitive heuristics too much, or the availability heuristic. If you want to learn about those, what should they do if they want to learn about those? Take cognitive, okay? All right, because we talked about all those there. Let me see, is this the next one? Okay, here we go. Another true or false. Like social psychologists, people are sensitive to situational causes when explaining the behavior of others. Is that true? Situational, when explaining others' behaviors. That's false, right? And what's our example from class earlier? Cutting you off, and the first thing is, what do we say about that? Yes, he wasn't a kind person. Okay? That's false. And this leads us into the most pernicious error in all of social psychology. If you leave a social psychology class and you don't know the fundamental attribution error, you missed out on one of the most important things that you can take from this class, because this is pervasive. All right? And as it sounds, it is a fundamental error in forming attributions. All right? And what it says is just what we alluded to, is that when we explain other people's behavior, we overestimate the role of personal factors and overlook the impact of the environment. So that person cut me off. I overestimate that's due to something personal about them, and I'm not likely to even consider that it could be something situational, and I form that initial judgment that they are a jerk, an asshole, right? Whereas maybe it's the other thing. Maybe I sit there and, some of you may not think this way, okay, but maybe somebody helps you at the grocery store, right? Maybe, here you go. Maybe you're in the grocery store and probably helps more if you have kids, okay? You got a kid sitting in the cart, and the kid takes the can of dog food and throws it down onto the floor. And somebody walking by picks it up and hands it to you. What are you likely to say? Thank you, and what are you going to say about that person? Oh, that's a nice person. You're going to form what? Personal attribution, right? Whereas maybe that person isn't a nice person. Maybe they only did it because it's the social norm, or maybe they only did it because they're out on a date with somebody and they want to make sure that they look good in front of their date. Right? Hey, some people, you know. There you go. See? There you go. That's what you do. Like I said, take them someplace fun. In Costco, there's no place more fun than Costco. Okay? But we tend to overlook the impact of the situations, both positive and negative. Right? We explain other people's behavior as due to something to themselves, or more likely to due to something of themselves. Okay? So let's take a look back at that Jones and Harris study, like I said we were going to look back at. Okay? Here's that data again. Now, this over here, this side, this is when they're told this person chose the position. Does that make sense, right? So they think this is a true, according to correspondent inference theory, they had a choice, they made this choice, so therefore, since they had a choice, I'm going to say that their position is a product of them, how they truly feel, right? That's why those that made pro-Castro speech, I think, have higher values or higher attitudes, greater attitudes, more positive attitudes towards Castro than those that chose to write the anti-Castro speech. Makes sense, right? So let's ignore that. That doesn't matter. All right? Let's look over here. Right? Here, this is where we're told this person had no choice. Right? So let's think about this theoretically. If I say the person had no choice, should I use the speech that they gave as any indication whatsoever of how they truly feel? No, right? Because I say they didn't have a choice. Does that make sense? Right? So I shouldn't use it. But we still see that people did, right? If they didn't, this bar and this bar should both be equal. Does that make sense? But we don't see that. Even though people realize this person didn't have a choice, they still overlook that situational factor and assume that it, at least in part, had to be due to something personal. Does that make sense? That's that fundamental attribution error. Even when you're told, hey, it could be a product of the environment, you still sit there and say, well, not entirely. It's still probably something about them. Does that make sense? So you could sit there, and even if I said to you, or you're sitting in the car with your mother and say, hey, you know, maybe the person is lost. I don't care. They're stupid anyway. Right? Yeah, they got lost in the first place. They're stupid. But you see that, right? Okay? We sit there and we attribute it to the environment. All right? Or the individual. Let's finish up on that. When we come back, we can review. We can look at this guy next class. Okay? All right? And then next class, we're going to finish up Chapter 4 and get into Chapter 5. Enjoy your weekend.